The Amityville Horror, New York, 1975. You know how some houses just look normal, but feel wrong the moment you step inside? That was 112 Ocean Avenue. In 1975, George and Kathy Lutz moved in with their 3 children. Just 13 months earlier, a man named Ronald DeFeo had murdered his entire family in that very house. The Lutzes thought they could leave that behind. They couldn't. From the first night, things spiraled. Cold spots in rooms where the heat was blasting, doors slamming shut without wind. The youngest daughter spoke of a pig-faced creature with glowing red eyes that only she could see. George would wake every night at 3:15 a.m., the exact time of the murders. He said he'd hear footsteps pacing through the halls, even when everyone else was asleep. The family claimed slime oozed from the walls. Objects moved on their own. A priest who came to bless the house was told by a disembodied voice, "Get out." Within 28 days, the Lutz family fled. They left furniture, clothes, even food on the table. They never went back. To this day, people argue if it was real or a hoax. But one thing is certain, the Amityville house has become one of America's most infamous hauntings, a nightmare burned into history. The Bell Witch, Tennessee, 1817 to 1821. This one goes back 200 years, but people in Tennessee still talk about it. The Bell family lived on a quiet farm in Robertson County. In 1817, they started hearing strange tapping on the walls of their cabin. Then came the sounds of chains dragging across the floor. Soon, the knocks turned into whispers, and the whispers turned into a voice. The spirit called itself Kate. It cursed the family, mocked them, and became violent. The children were slapped and pinched. The father, John Bell, was the main target. He was tormented day after day. Neighbors were invited to witness it, and many swore they heard the same voice, loud, angry, mocking. This wasn't just a private haunting. The entire community got pulled into it. By 1820, John Bell's health collapsed. His family found a strange vial of black liquid in the house. When he drank it, he died. The voice of the Bell Witch laughed and declared it had poisoned him. The haunting eventually faded, but stories of the Bell Witch spread across the South. Even President Andrew Jackson, who supposedly visited the area, was said to have been scared off by the spirit. To this day, the Bell Witch Cave in Tennessee is considered one of the most haunted spots in America. People who go there swear they still hear whispers in the dark. The Sallie House, Kansas, 1990s. At first, it looked like an ordinary rental home in Atchison, Kansas. But for Tony and Deborah Pickman, moving in would turn into years of fear. They said it started small, lights flickering, strange cold spots, their dog barking at empty corners of the room. But things got worse, much worse. Tony would wake up with scratches on his chest and arms, as if something invisible had attacked him while he slept. Electrical appliances switched on and off by themselves. Fires broke out without explanation. They later learned the legend. A little girl named Sally had supposedly died in that house during surgery. Paranormal investigators came in and recorded spikes of electromagnetic energy, cold breezes moving through sealed rooms, and unexplained voices captured on tape. But the scariest moments were the attacks. Tony was often left bleeding, marked up by scratches that appeared in front of witnesses. Whatever haunted the Sallie house, it wasn't innocent. The family finally moved out. The house is still standing, and it's considered one of the most active haunted houses in America. Paranormal groups who visit say the same thing. There's something violent in that house, and it doesn't want to be ignored. 3 stories. 3 different parts of America. One thing in common, people swore they lived through something that can't be explained. Was it mass hysteria, or proof that the line between the living and the dead is much thinner than we think? What do you believe?
Prisons are built to confine, to punish, to break men down until nothing remains but silence and stone. But what happens when the silence isn't empty? When footsteps echo in abandoned corridors? When whispers rise from the walls? Tonight, we're walking through 5 of the most haunted prisons and prison-like places on Earth. From America's crumbling penitentiaries to the Tower of London itself, where history bleeds into legend. Stay close, keep your lights steady, and don't look back if you hear someone breathing behind you. Opened in 1829, Eastern State was one of the first true penitentiaries. Its design was revolutionary. Isolation, silence, and reflection. Prisoners lived in stone cells, alone for years. The Quakers, who influenced it, believed solitude would lead to penitence. Instead, it broke minds. Men scratched messages into the walls. Some screamed for days, others whispered prayers to no one. The system was abandoned in the early 1900s, but the suffering never left. Tourists and staff report the same chilling encounters. Shadows darting down corridors, doors slamming without cause, and disembodied laughter echoing through cell block 12. One guard swore he saw figures standing at the end of a hall, dark, human-shaped, but when he raised his light, the corridor was empty. The sound of pacing footsteps in locked cells, phantom weeping behind sealed doors, and figures in tattered prison uniforms appearing only to vanish when approached. These are common reports. Imagine, you step into a cold, decaying corridor. Your flashlight beam lands on a cell, and for a moment, you're sure someone's standing inside, watching, waiting. Alcatraz, the Rock, a place built to be inescapable. From 1934 to 1963, it caged America's most dangerous criminals. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, the Birdman of Alcatraz. But the bars weren't the only thing keeping them in. Fear was. Inmates whispered about an unseen presence in Cell Block D, the dreaded solitary wing. Cell 14D was called the Hole. Men sent there often came out broken, terrified. One story haunts the prison's lore. An inmate thrown into 14D began screaming through the night. He swore something with glowing eyes was in there with him. Guards ignored his cries until the screaming stopped. By morning, he was dead. Officially, he strangled himself. Unofficially, guards whispered they saw claw marks around his throat. Even now, visitors report cold spots in D Block, doors that rattle and sounds of sobbing. Rangers tell of footsteps following them through empty corridors. Some even hear banjo music drifting across the wind. Capone's ghost, still strumming in his final days of madness. Imagine standing in the hole, lights out, the air thick and heavy. Then, breath on your neck and a whisper that isn't yours. Port Arthur began in 1830 as a penal colony for the worst of Britain's convicts. Surrounded by wilderness and ocean, escape was nearly impossible. The punishment system was brutal: hard labor, silence, isolation. The separate prison at Port Arthur forced inmates into hoods, total silence, and solitary confinement. Many lost their minds. Some never spoke again. When bushranger Martin Cash was held here, he wrote about the suffocating silence, men whispering to themselves just to hear another voice. Today, Port Arthur is a preserved historic site and one of Australia's most haunted. Visitors report ghostly children playing, shadows crossing in locked rooms, and a woman in gray gliding silently past the cells. One of the most famous haunted spots is the parsonage, where a clergyman once lived. His ghost, pale and solemn, is seen pacing the halls. At the separate prison, tourists often collapse in terror after feeling invisible hands grip them. Walk those halls at night and you'll hear it, the shuffle of boots, the sob of a man who should have been freed long ago, and the quiet, desperate plea, "Please, don't leave me here." Built in 1935 by the British, Old Changi Hospital served colonial troops and families. But during the Japanese occupation in 1942, Singapore fell into shadow. While official records don't confirm torture inside the hospital itself, legends claim the Kempeitai, the Japanese secret police, used its wards for interrogation. Rumors of blood-stained rooms and cries in the night have clung to it ever since. The hospital closed in 1997. Since then, it has become a decaying husk. Paint peeling, windows shattered, corridors swallowed by vines, and inside, silence that isn't silent. Visitors tell of white-clad apparitions drifting across halls, a nurse carrying a child, a boy sitting on a ward bed, staring out a window, eyes hollow. Soldiers in uniform glimpsed in broken mirrors. Some swear they hear crying in the pediatric ward. Others see shadows that glide through walls. In one tale, a figure in white turned with no face, just emptiness, before vanishing into the dark. Step into Block 24 on a stormy night. The air is damp, heavy. A sob rises ahead of you. You chase it, but the corridor is empty. And when you turn back, the door you came through is locked from the other side.
Shortly after my son was born, then my husband and I bought a 50-year-old house. It was just the three of us, plus our dog, and the house was full of the usual quirks: creaking floors, rattling pipes, tree branches scraping the windows at night. I grew up afraid of the dark, so every bump in the night put me on edge. But I always told myself it was just the house. After my husband and I split, I kept a house. He kept the dog. One evening, my son and I were watching a movie when my phone died. I went to the kitchen to plug it in, and that's when I felt it. This sinking goosebump chill that told me something was off. I looked out back and froze. Someone was sitting cross-legged in the yard, facing the house. They were still, too still, a hood over their head, sunglasses even though the sun was gone. They didn't move when I leaned closer to the glass, and they didn't move when they knew I'd seen them. I locked the door, grabbed my charger, and messaged a friend online to call the police if I didn't check back soon. Then I called 911 as soon as my phone powered up. The dispatcher told me to look again. That's when I saw it. Our back door was locked, but the dog door was wide open, big enough for a person to crawl through. I stood to get a better look, and there they were. Hood, sunglasses, face pressed against the window, staring straight at me. The dispatcher screamed at me to grab my son and lock ourselves in a room. I scooped him up and started running when I heard it. The dog door creaking open, slow and deliberate. We bolted out the front and into the street. Police found her minutes later. She had been sitting calmly on the back step, her arm pushing lazily in and out of the dog door. That was the night I boarded it shut, but I never trusted that house again.
Back when I was in high school, my parents moved us into an old farmhouse. The place was beautiful but isolated. Big yard, thick woods, and creaky wooden floors that echoed when you walked. The first strange thing I noticed was the attic. The door to it was in the hallway near my bedroom. Sometimes it would be shut, other times wide open. My parents swore they hadn't touched it. One night, I woke up to what sounded like heavy footsteps above me. Slow, careful. I lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak of someone walking back and forth. When I finally worked up the nerve to check, the attic door was wide open. My dad went up there the next morning and found nothing. But things kept happening. Objects missing, food vanishing, weird smells drifting from the vents. Weeks later, the police came. They'd caught a man in a nearby town who had been living in strangers' attics and crawl spaces. He admitted to staying in our house for months. When I think back to those nights, me lying awake under the ceiling while he stood just a few feet above, I still get chills.
I was about 12 when this happened. Our house had a big sliding glass door that faced the backyard. At night, with no curtains, it was like a black mirror reflecting the living room back at us. One night, I was watching TV when I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. They came from the glass. I turned my head, expecting to see a tree branch or maybe my dad outside, but it wasn't. It was a man. His face pressed against the glass, his smile too wide, teeth catching the faint light from the TV. I screamed for my parents. By the time they came running, he was gone. Police searched the yard, but found only footprints in the mud leading up to the glass, then disappearing into the woods. For months, I couldn't sit in that room at night, because every time I looked at that door, I imagined his smile waiting for me in the reflection. I was driving home late one night after visiting a friend. Empty highway, no other cars, just the glow of my headlights cutting through the dark. About halfway, I glanced in the rearview mirror and my heart nearly stopped. Someone was sitting in the back seat. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks, but no, there was a shadowy figure leaning forward, inches from the back of my head. I swerved the car, slammed on the brakes, spun around. Nothing. The seat was empty. I tried to shake it off as exhaustion, but when I got home and opened the back door, I saw something that made me sick. The seat belt in the middle seat was buckled. Tight. I never drove alone at night again. When my daughter was born, I kept a baby monitor by the bed, old-fashioned one, just sound, no video. One night, I woke to the crackle of static. Then I heard it, singing, a soft, low lullaby humming through the monitor. I shot out of bed and ran to her room. She was fast asleep. No music. No one there. I grabbed her and rushed back, my heart racing. Over the next few nights, it happened again. Sometimes singing, sometimes whispering. Once, a woman's voice clearly said, "Shh, go back to sleep." I eventually threw the monitor away. But even now, when I hear static, I remember that voice. And I wonder if whoever was speaking ever stopped standing over her crib.